This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 144 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is a kind of, I guess it's a kind of a deep one. It's grief, travel and change. I feel like I'm really fortunate with this podcast because sometimes I get to talk to people about really intimate, emotional parts of their lives and things that have come about in that part of their lives through travel. I'm really grateful when they share these kind of stories, and I know we can all learn a lot from them. So that's what's happening in today's episode. I've got three great guests, and they're three stories which could be sad because they're connected to the death of friends and family, but actually they all end up being good news stories. So that's what it's all about: grief, travel, and change. Please excuse my croaky voice. It's winter down here in Australia, and it's a winter bug because I have a 9-year-old. So he brings home these lovely bugs from school. Anyway, I sound worse than I feel, fortunately, and hopefully I'll get through this recording. But to start off with, I chatted a few weeks back with Justin Watson, and he, in this story, tells me about a time when he took a trip when he wasn't really kind of ready to, or maybe not, didn't really plan to do it, but he's very glad he did. A bit cryptic, but this chat will reveal all.
It's a couple of years ago now. I'm just thinking 2 or 3, and I'd already been on a big long trip that year, and it's like, don't have any money to go anywhere else. And it just so happens that 2 different friends of mine, one in Canada and one where I live, both asked me to go traveling with them, and it just so happened to be back-to-back weeks. So I've gone, this is great. So I ended up traveling with my friend Claire in Iceland for 10 days, and as you've been there and you know just how amazing it is, and yes. I really have to go back there sometime. I just, as a photographer as well, it's just hard to put into words. I just thought it can't be this good, but then when you get there, you go, yeah, it is.
Yeah, and, I had super high expectations, and yet it still exceeded them. Yeah,
yeah, and we had a great time in Iceland. Now, the other part of this trip is where a lot of emotions occurred because I was meeting up with a friend of mine called John who was diagnosed with cancer, and he was a bit, he didn't really tell his friends just how bad he was, I guess. We just kind of would think of it as, we'd see him a fair bit, and, he was off work and he was undergoing chemo and things like that. But, he said to me, "Oh, Justin, we've always wanted to go and watch an NFL game in America." And I said, "Yeah, we have." And he said, "Let's go do it this year." And I didn't think anything of this at the time, and I just said to him, as long as you're healthy enough to go. And so off we went. We were in Washington DC, and we spent a couple of days there. He had his wife with him, and they were going to a few other places that he wanted to go to, like Cape Canaveral and things like that. And so we went and watched this game, and his wife had arranged for the local team to bring him in Washington to bring him a souvenir gift pack and things like this. So so it was all great. And at his team lost and my team won. So, but that's besides the point. We spent time together and we had a great time. And I came home and he came home a couple of weeks later, and I never really thought too much about it. I just thought we'd finally done this trip we'd been talking about. And then, within, I think, would have been within 2 months that we got the phone call, and his wife had said he's gone now, and it's like,
wow.
And I just went, and coming from my point of view, I never really lost. Like I still had all my grandparents still alive at that time and things like that. So I'd never really lost too many people that were that important in my life. So it actually turned out to be quite a difficult time. But then looking back and going, I was actually thinking at the time, I can't afford to do this because I've already been on a trip this year. And I'm trying to remember where I went to that year, but it was a fairly big trip. And I think I'd already done a 4-week holiday. So I ended up having to take some leave without pay. But I'm just so glad now that I actually went on the trip, because I just kind of, I was trying to be positive and just assumed he was going to live a lot longer than he ended up living. And I don't know whether he knew that he didn't have much time left in him or what it was, but I think, and I probably wouldn't have gone if it also wasn't for my other friend saying, let's go do Iceland together. We can split the costs of hiring a car and all that kind of stuff. So if all those things didn't align, I might not have gone on that trip.
Yeah.
And I think I would have felt, I don't know how badly I would have felt, but it was just something that I'm so glad I did now. And when I see his wife, I always talk about that trip with her, because I go, I'm just so glad that I actually went and did that, because I thought he had many more years to go, and just being so positive about everything and how the treatment was going. So wow. Yeah, that definitely changed my life, how I look at things now. And if someone, I probably wasn't someone that would necessarily turn down opportunities, but to do some travel and things like that. But there's always that practical side. There's always that,
Yeah, and we still have to pay the bills and stuff, so you can't travel nonstop. Yeah.
That's right. But I took some money off. Took some money out of mortgage and a few other places, and I managed to scrummage up the money to do the trip, and definitely don't regret it at all. And so just so glad that I actually went on that trip.
Yeah. I think you'd be full of regret if you hadn't, and instead you have really wonderful memories instead to think back on with him.
So I don't know if it changed my life immensely, but it definitely left a huge mark in my life having done that, and that's going to be a memory that I'll remember forever. So
it's a good lesson for all of us not to make too many excuses about why we can't do things, and find out if there really is a way to do things.
And even this relates to day-to-day life as well. People, I often say, let's go. I'll say to some friends or something, who wants to go do something? And so many people just have, no, I'm not sure I'll like that, or and it's like, some of these things might take an hour out of your life and might be the best thing you've ever done, but you'll never know until you take the step. Yeah. And the same goes for travel. A lot of people don't know how to start traveling, and I see a lot of people saying, I'm not sure about going traveling solo and things like that. But sometimes you just got to take the step and never regret it.
I think, as Justin points out, really just trying to take that no regrets decision without being reckless, of course. You don't want to, mortgage your house down to the last cent and have nothing left to live off just so you can take a trip. But being reasonable about it, I think, is a really pragmatic approach, and obviously it worked out well for Justin. It reminds me actually of a phrase that one of my favourite writers and podcasters, Gretchen Rubin, often says, and this phrase, I actually have it pinned to my fridge. It says, or she often says, choose the bigger life. And choosing the bigger life, as she says, can be different for everyone, but it's that concept of what is the bigger life for me that often helps me make a decision about things like that. For example, last year we went to Cambodia and Vietnam, and it was quite a long trip, and I didn't know if it was really the right thing to do to take that much time out from, the rest of my normal work, and for my son to miss school and all of that. And for various reasons, I decided that taking that trip was choosing the bigger life. And, of course, it turned out to be absolutely the right thing to do. I do not regret it for a millisecond. So choosing the bigger life, if we can all manage to try that without having to have something bad happen to help us realise that, that's even better. Now, my next guest today is Dean O'Shea, and I chatted with Dean in a previous episode. In fact, if you want to listen back, it was episode 133 about the big trips that changed everything. And he told me in that episode about the time when he was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, and then he found out that very unexpectedly his father had passed away and he had to get home. Moving on from that story, he had another related story to tell, which fits into the topic of today's episode.
About 3 years after that experience, so that was the effect it had on me. The effect that it had on my brother was something entirely different. Mm-hmm. And so he spent the next 3 years of his life basically just living on my mum's sofa, being depressed and, got into drugs and alcohol and all this kind of stuff. And he didn't really have any career prospects. He was just kind of got into just a huge rut after that happened. Mm. And I knew that, he'd always wanted to travel. He's always wanted to, have those kinds of experiences, but he'd never had the opportunity, and he'd never had the opportunities like I had to, go out and travel and explore the world and have these experiences. And so, after seeing him in this way and, I was going off and doing all of these adventures, I kind of got into my head that this may be just what he needs to kind of get him out of that rut. Mm. So for his 30th birthday, I completely surprised him and I booked a trip for both of us to go to Morocco. I picked Morocco especially because it's a place that I've been to before. And I knew that it had the right kind of ingredients to, have to facilitate rapid personal transformation, because it's a completely different culture. Arabic Berber culture there is so different from that in Europe. There's so much in the country. Morocco is not a huge country, but it's got snowy mountains, it's got sandy deserts, it's got forests, it's got beaches, it's got everything really. And so we did a little circuit around the whole country, which kind of included all of these different biospheres and all of these different cultures. And we kind of just played it by ear. So the most important moment that I wanted to have for him was standing out on the dunes in the Sahara Desert, because Beautiful. I knew that would be kind of, where the transformation was going to happen. So I designed kind of this hero's journey around this objective, so that we had to get to this desert. And along the way, we had to, deal with language barriers. We had to barter, deal with differences in culture, transport. We went climbing up in the heightless mountains. He'd never climbed a mountain before, so that was a first for him.
Awesome.
We got caught out in the snow with the wrong equipment. We had cars break down. We had, all these kinds of things. But eventually we made it to the Sahara Desert, and we hired out this Jeep and we rode this Jeep. We're sitting on top of this Jeep and we rode out over the dunes into the Sahara Desert, and we stayed in this little Bedouin camp. Mm-hmm. And then just before sunset, we went up onto the tallest dune around, and then we just kind of sat there, and we sat there in silence, a little ways apart, so that he could have his space. And after a while, I looked at him and I saw this look in his eyes, which was it was a look that I'd never seen in him before. And that's when I knew that, something had happened, like inside his head. Something had happened in his life that had inspired him and that was going to make a positive change. And it did. So when he came back, he quit smoking. He got super into fitness, gave up drugs. He got a job. And now he's been traveling around Southeast Asia. He's been traveling around South America. And he even took me on a trip to Iceland this year. Wow. As kind of for my 30th birthday, kind of as a repayment for that trip.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's just amazing to see. And, we're also proud of him and everything that he's accomplished in the last couple of years. And, yeah, I'm just so grateful that because we had a huge bonding moment on that trip as well. We've been very distant for many years, and now we're like best friends.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, travel is very powerful. I agree, especially in those really hard moments in life. I think that getting away from your everyday life, especially if, like your brother's case, when he's in a real rut like that, to just be completely taken beyond all your comfort zones. It has to change you in a positive way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the right kind of ingredients that can just be a catalyst for rapid personal transformation. And after that trip, I actually started my company, which is helping corporate professionals to become leaders through transformational travel experiences. Which is a great idea. Which was inspired by that trip, because before that I'd just been going on adventures by myself. And then, I kind of got this idea in my head that I would help my brother. And then, I saw, the huge results that I'd had in his life. And I was like, maybe actually I could like do this for a living. And yeah, it's been amazing. I've been on some great adventures with people over the last couple of years. And yeah, really, it's amazing to be able to see these transformations in other people.
Dean's story about taking his brother travelling is just, for me, just such a powerful reminder of how travel can be life-changing, especially when you're dealing with serious grief like they were. So great story, I think. Now, my final guest today is Kate Manser, and she started really thinking about how travel and other things can be life-changing and how it's important to really, live for the moment. Sounds cliched, but let Kate explain, because I think she says it better.
So the You Might Die Tomorrow project, I started probably around the time that you started this podcast, around 3 years ago. And it all started, I was just a normal person who didn't really think very much about death until in the span of 6 months, about 4 years ago, I had 3 young people around my same age die, again, all within 6 months, and all just random tragedies. Right. And man, it just really affected me. And I went from never thinking about death to thinking about it all the time, because I was so worried, like, oh, if these people my age can die so suddenly and unexpectedly, I could die too. And I started just like having a lot of anxiety about it. And whenever the phone would ring, I would have, some anxiety that came up, and I was having trouble sleeping because I was so worried about death all the time. And I put a lot of energy into that death anxiety. And then one day there was another person who died. This is a guy, his name is Dan Friedenberg. He's my friend and my colleague at Google. And he was also an adventurer and a traveler. And he was actually climbing Mount Everest, and he died in an avalanche during the Nepal earthquake. And I was like, oh man, here's another person. He was 33 or 34 years old. And it just really hit me that, he climbed Mount Everest, and he knew that it was a very dangerous thing to do. And, but he had to climb it in order to live an authentic life. And so when I realized that I could die climbing Mount Everest, or I could die, driving through an intersection, or I could die climbing the stairs, and I'm putting so much energy in trying to control something that I can't control, why don't I put that energy into living my life as vibrantly as I can until whenever that mystery moment comes that I do die. And so that was the moment that I realized that whereas I had been really afraid of dying tomorrow, suddenly I realized, hey, I could die tomorrow. And that's a really freeing concept, and motivates me to not put off my dreams and to tell people that I love them, and to really prioritize enjoying my life. And so from there, I came up with the You Might Die Tomorrow project, and I started blogging, and my book is coming out this June. And it's just a message that I've been spreading it for the past 3 years all over the world. And it's been really beautiful. There's thousands of people around the world now that have You Might Die Tomorrow stickers. And it's something that inspires me, and is inspiring other people to live vibrantly as well.
I think that's a fabulous concept, and I'm sorry you had to go through all those, the deaths of young people around you to reach that. But it's good to see something so inspiring coming out of it. It's a funny coincidence almost that you speak about Dan Friedenberg dying in the Nepal earthquake. I've had a guest on before, Pam Lynch, who's also a good friend of mine here in Perth, and she speaks a lot about, she was in her 60s when she returned to climb to Everest Base Camp for a second time, and she'd never thought she'd do it twice, and she did. And through this whole long series of coincidences, she wasn't supposed to still be in Kathmandu when the earthquake struck, but she was. And she should have been, in this particular spot in town where she definitely would have ended up under, a massive pile of rubble, but she kept changing her mind and, all these random things that ended up, she was there, but she survived it. And that was also for her very life-altering experiences. And she's come back to completely change her career and all of that. So, it's amazing how these kind of, these horrid, natural disasters and stuff can have all these ripple effects, going around the world to change people's lives. It's amazing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's the thing is that with the You Might Die Tomorrow project, one of my goals is that you don't have to have a traumatic experience in order to have a new life perspective.
Yeah.
Because, nobody really wants to go through that. I think when we do go through them, we end up stronger, but that still doesn't mean that, we want to go through these tragedies. And so I believe that by contemplating and meditating on our mortality, that we can experience these the benefits that we often get through these, life-altering tragedies without having to go.
There's so many interesting connections the more guests I talk to. I mentioned when I was chatting to Kate about Pam Lynch's story, and I would recommend going back to episode 99, Close Calls When Travelling, and having a listen to Pam talk about her experience in Nepal during that same earthquake. But goodness me. Anyway, I'm feeling like I'm either going to lose my voice or I'm going to get too emotional from all these really emotional stories. I'm really grateful to the guests to share these stories today. So thank you very, very much to Justin, Dean and Kate for being part of this episode about grief, travel and change. I hope it's been interesting and inspiring for everyone. A few places where you can find these people. So you can find Justin at his blog, Justin's World, at justins.world. One of those cool new domain endings, isn't it? You can find Dean at his site Unbelievable Adventures, and that is at unbelievableadventures.co.uk. And you can find Kate at You Might Die Tomorrow, which is at youmightdietomorrow.com. In the show notes, which are at notaballerina.com/144, I'll leave those links as well as links to episodes 133 and 99, which I mentioned during this episode. And of course, do come along and join our Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers. We are now at over 600 members. Yay! And you can either follow the link in the show notes or just search Facebook for Thoughtful Travellers. Thank you very, very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.